This morning, this is continued from our January 7th meeting. Today is January 28th, and we are the Concord City Council sitting as the local reuse authority. And at this time, I'd like to call our meeting to order and also note that our meeting is being held remotely via Zoom, and information about how to participate in Zoom is in the agenda. And we will also have a Spanish interpretation. There's also an overflow room available on site if people want to see there as well. And we are also being broadcast live on our Comcast Channel 28 Astound Wave, which is on Channel 1026, and AT&T U-verse on Channel 99, and also streamed on our city's website. So lots of ways to watch us this morning. And before I proceed, I'd like to remind the public that the public comment period for this agenda item, which today we are considering the Local Reuse Authority's acceptance of the First Partners Limited Liability Corporation's term sheet for the development of the Concord Naval Weapons Station. And there will not be an opportunity for the public to speak today. We closed the public comment on January 7th. If you remember, we were here quite late taking public comment. And at this point, we had returned it back to the council for doing follow-up questions and then our discussion and deliberations. So at that point in time, I will again resume this morning's meeting to move forward with our additional follow-up questions and then the deliberations of the city council. And since this is continued meeting, there is no general public comment as well on non-agenda items. And do we have the roll call, please? There's no pledge of allegiance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we will move to roll call. City Clerk.
Councilmember Aliano?
Here.
Councilmember Nakamura?
Here.
Councilmember Obringer?
I'm here.
Vice Mayor Brisson? Here. Mayor Hoffmeister?
I am here as well. And as I mentioned, we left off concluding the public comment period on this item, and we had brought it back to the City Council. And at this point, we're up for questions from the council. We had some questions last January 7th in relationship to the presentations that were made, and we've heard a lot of public comment, and some questions were raised by the public as well. So now's an opportunity for the council for any follow-up questions. And I will see if there's any follow-up questions from my colleagues up here at the dais. Okay, we're ready. Okay, Councilmember Obringer.
Thank you. So I think there were a few questions that the community raised about environmental concerns. So, Mr. Bierke, I think that these might be for you, but we'll find out. And I had the chance after the January 7th meeting to attend the Navy's Restoration Advisory Board meeting. So there were some additional dialogue about this as well. But could you share with us a little bit about the responsibility for the environmental cleanup? So we don't have a specific plan right now, and the Navy is doing cleanup to different, whether it's industrial, commercial, or residential standards. And so what would happen if, say, the Navy right now is cleaning up land to an industrial standard, but later on, when we have a specific plan, that same piece of property is slated for residential development? Who's responsible for that additional cleanup?
Well, technically, if the Navy is cleaning up the sites as they are located to the standards that we designated in the area plan. So as long as the cleanup meets those standards, we're fine. As you suggest, though, to the extent that we move uses dramatically, then we might have some additional remediation that will, the responsibility for which would fall to the project rather than to the Navy.
Okay, so whenever you say fall to the project, does that fall to the master developer then to oversee that? Or how do we, what I'm getting at is how do we ensure the public safety that the land is cleaned up to the standard of the intended use? So people who are living there are going to be safe.
Yes, so as part of the specific planning process, we'll be coordinating with the Navy's remediation process to ensure that whatever is approved in the specific plan has a remediation or cleanup process that coordinates or synchronizes with what we're approving.
But my understanding is that sometimes the Navy's timeline is longer than our development timeline. So what happens in that case if we want to get something cleaned up to a certain standard faster than the Navy is ready to do it?
Well, the process in the past, in the Lennar process and this current process, the master developers have coordinated with the Navy's expectations, because those are public expectations, such that they are planning future phases based on when the Navy thinks property will be ready to be redeveloped. So we're currently coordinating as we speak, but we will also be coordinating over time to make sure that the plans are in sync. Obviously, no, perhaps obviously is not the right word, sorry. To the extent that the Navy's cleanup is not quick enough for the momentum of the project and the city, the master developer and the Navy will negotiate over potential expediting of cleanup with remuneration by the Navy. That's not guaranteed, but that's one of the options available. If we need a site sooner than the Navy is able to clean it up, for various reasons, we can bring in private cleanup, have it done, and then move on with the project. That's expensive, that has impacts, and would need to be coordinated, but that's a future potential outcome.
And so who would pay for that if that's expensive?
The project, and when I say the project, and I apologize, whether we say the master developer will pay for it or the project, once we get to entitlements, it's one and the same. The master developer is contributing to bring infrastructure in, and then that becomes part of the project. So it'd become a project cost overall.
Okay. And then who has the oversight to ensure, to say, okay, it's been cleaned up and we can assure you, public, that this is safe, to make sure that the master developer or whomever or the Navy has done the cleanup to the safety standard that is needed?
Excellent question. That generally is done now through the Navy's creation of a finding of suitability to transfer. And it's in that document that they show what's been cleaned up, how it was cleaned up, and that document is, as well as all of the cleanup efforts, is reviewed in a what we call an over-the-shoulder fashion. In other words, monthly meetings with the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Toxic Substance Control, Cal EPA, the Water Board, the Air Board, every board, and they are participating in this process, and that is the assurance. Now, as we move forward, those meetings will continue to occur to the extent that in the development process we find something that is wrong, and we can determine that it was a Navy responsibility. We can ask the Navy to come back and take care of that. In fact, they're obligated to do so. The issue there gets to your first question, which is timing and how quickly they come back. They may agree to come back, but in their own time, based on their budgets, the federal budget, their abilities, so on and so forth.
Okay, but what I think I'm also asking about is property that's beyond the FOST. Again, if we have a scenario where we have, they've cleaned something up to, say, an industrial level identified in the area plan, but then later on, the area is intended for residential. So who has the oversight to ensure that the master developer or whomever is hired to do the cleanup? You know, once the Navy is out of the situation, I guess is what I'm asking. How would we ensure that, that everything has been done properly?
So it would be up to the city with the assistance of the regulatory agencies.
Okay, so those are state regulatory agencies or federal or?
Both.
Okay, so we are responsible ultimately. I wonder how much that will cost. Okay, and then speaking of the Navy, there's been a lot of concern about our decision today. And can you share with us if there is a decision to not support the term sheet? Have you spoken with the Navy, and what will the Navy do next? Will they be coming and repossessing the land, taking away our opportunity to control redevelopment? Can you share with us any conversations you've had along those lines?
The Navy has indicated they would like to speak to me on Monday.
Okay, so Okay. Thank you.
I think a more complete answer, I
yeah.
apologize. Look, the Navy has been through this process on a number of bases. They've been through this very process related to term sheets and master developer selections multiple times on various bases. They are watching as we speak, and we will have a conversation about outcome on Monday.
And haven't they also acknowledged that whenever we look at other base reuse processes, whether it's Alameda, Fort Ord, Mare Island, that there have been multiple master developers?
That's factually true, yes.
Okay, thank you. I think those are all my questions for you. And then I would like to, Mr. Parsons, if you don't mind, thank you.
Sorry, Jeb's not here. He's sick, so I'll do my best.
And if you don't mind identifying yourself.
Oh, I'm Louis Parsons. I'm with Discovery Builders and part of Concord First Partners.
Thank you. And so Jeb Elmore was was in your shoes last week, or last meeting? And,
Yes.
But he unfortunately has COVID, and so he's not here
Unfortunately.
today. So, so I just wanted to ask a little bit about the cleanup. Could you share with us the experience that, whether it's Discovery Builders, Lewis Group, California Group, could you share with us what the experience is doing environmental cleanup of Superfund sites like the Naval Weapons Station?
Yeah, and I'll also, our company has experience working adjacent to Superfund sites. We've recently remediated a old tank farm for a project that's located in Pittsburgh. We've gone through the process, worked with DTSC, sign off from the Water Board. A lot of situations are different. We've done quite a lot of work with development where there's USTs, underground storage tanks, and you're dealing with TCE issues and so on and so forth. So our company has done quite a lot of work. I know, as far as working on a contaminated federal site, we haven't done that. But part of the benefit of our partnership, and particularly working with CCIG and Phil Tagami, is their company has done that. But we've done that. We're working on a site right now that we're working with DTSC. So
What is DTSC, just for,
Department of Toxic Substance Control.
Thank you.
And they oversee, but as sort of Guy alluded to, there's various oversight depending on the type of contamination. So you'll have DTSC involved, you'll have the Water Board involved. Sometimes they defer to one another. Sometimes it's a non-toxic, and so the Water Board is involved if it's like a petroleum base. But our company over the years has dealt with wells, underground storage tanks, remediated tank farms, so on and so forth. So our company, the firms we work with, TRC, NGO, so on and so forth, we've done a lot of that work, and I don't know if you want to speak to it too, Phil.
Thank you. It would be great to hear more. And if you don't mind identifying yourself.
Good morning. Phil Tagami. I'm the CEO of California Capital Investment Group. The project that Mr. Parsons was referring to was the Oakland Army Base, or the former Oakland Army Base. Before transfer, the Army identified remedial action plan and remedial management plan sites in conjunction with EPA and DTSC at the state of California. So in essence, the way that works, in this case, in the Oakland case, the determination was made for an early transfer where the city and the state of California were taking responsibility for cleanup. The state, of course, passed that through to the city. The city had to demonstrate its capacity to do that, and it capped or locked in a number that the Army, in essence, would be responsible for. Beyond that, any work that took place on RAP, RMP sites, remedial action plan, or remedial management plan sites, required a reopener, if you will, depending on what that work was. So geographically, if you were going to be trenching or if you were going to be building a building, you needed to notify DTSC and open a new ticket and follow protocols that were codified in the remedial action plan or the remedial management plan. The other agencies referred to, Regional Water Quality Control Board, as well as the Air Board, were involved in that process depending on what type of contamination it was. So nothing would be different here if there is, in essence, cleanup to a transfer standard and then a land use was to change. The criteria of what that cleanup is, depending on what the land use is different at a state level than what was determined for cleanup, quote unquote, by the Navy for transfer to Concord. So that has to be a check off. Everyone has to agree. Once that work is prescribed, that has to be understood. Any material, and I'll use the term soil, that's going to be removed from a trench or that's moved around during grading has to be classified, evaluated, tested, and we create on-site what we call a SMET yard, a suspicious materials yard, where that soil has to sit.
Donde esa tierra tiene que sentarse para poder evaluarla.
Where that soil has to sit until it's, in essence, cleared to either be reused on-site or it's determined if it has to be disposed off-site. So I could go on and on. There's a full protocol that has to be followed when we have to deal with those issues. Quantifying that, understanding that, would be better understood or illuminated from the specific plan. And so as the Navy's going through its process and these phases have already been determined, that work plan would be then looked at by the experts and the professionals who are currently cooperating and meeting on that process, and then they would provide feedback that would better inform not only construction and construction sequencing, but also the related cost and the responsible parties for that cost.
Thank you. And so in the case of Oakland, so who has been responsible for that additional, who has funded that additional cleanup?
It's, again, determined if there was a change of use or activity or subsequent activity. So in our case, we took responsibility after it was cleared for transfer. The city could participate only to a certain extent, and then private developers, myself and other third parties that took responsibility for vertical development then had to pay, depending on what the activity was. So if I was to go tomorrow and say I'm going to put a trench in the ground and connect a sewer line, and as we're digging we find contamination, there's certain criteria that would say, oh, we have to contact the city, they have responsibility, pause. And there's other activity that's like, no, that's in an area that we have taken responsibility from the city. It's in our leasehold area. We've said we'll be responsible for it. So it's really not that binary. It's conditioned in our lease.
Got it. And then my last question is at the Oakland Army base, there was no residential, correct? It was just cleanup to
That's
industrial?
correct. So it's been determined that site, one of the reasons why we ended up as the developers there, a lot of our competitors were pursuing housing, and that site's been determined never to be allowed for housing use by the DTSC.
Okay, and so in your experience, have you worked on other Superfund sites that have been converted to residential?
I won't say Superfund, I'll just say contaminated sites.
Okay.
So there's a distinction between those because it wasn't classified as a Superfund site. And I would go as far as to say one of those sites stopped and is now not being pursued for its original design because of the change in laws in 2019 of the allowed parts per million contamination and types of contamination that they let housing go forward on. So our experiences, there are, green lights, yellow lights, and red lights. There was the yellow light. We were doing the evaluation and the study on the site, and then it was determined and new laws were passed in California that came into effect in 2019 that then created a red light saying it's not feasible for that site to be used or it's not suitable for residential development that's reasonable, meaning it was determined to be cost prohibitive to clean up to a standard that would allow it. So that site now is being repurposed for something else.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. And I have one more question for Mr. Parsons, and then I'm done. So I have this question because I think we all saw one of the articles in the East Bay Times, and so this is relevant to the term sheet and the financing of it. And so there is a paragraph here saying, according to a court affidavit submitted by Louis Parsons, which is you, president of Discovery Builders, the lawsuit between Albertino II and Albertino III to reassert control. The family companies have, quote, disrupted the business of those entities, including stop payments orders to vendors, which has placed Discovery Builders projects at risk of liens and losing subcontractors. So I just wanted to find out, oh, good morning. If you would please.
Good morning, Albert Sino, Discovery Builders, one of the partners of CFP. Thank you, Ms. Obringer. And, it's ongoing litigation. We can't talk about it. It wouldn't be appropriate.
So but no one can confirm whether or not there's stop payments orders to vendors? That's what I'm asking about. I'm not asking about the lawsuit.
There's not. Everything's good. I've been thinking about this meeting and it was all going to be about. And we've got a wonderful term sheet here. Guy and company, Joan, Jerry, we've all agreed. We've never had a bad word with each other. We've worked together, city manager, for the most part, city attorney, all the people that have been part of it. If you don't want us, you got to set us free, That's it. It's that simple. We've worked our tails off. We've worked our buns to the grindstone. And if you don't want us here, if there's maybe somebody or another group that's waiting in the wings, you got to have the respect for us and just, we love the city. You got to love us and let us go. We got to know our destiny. I want nothing more, and I think my group wants nothing more to plan the project, but we are such in early stages, and we're talking about things like, it's like looking at a golf course that's perfectly manicured and one blade of grass is a little high and we're going to get the rototiller out and start all over. It's just not fair for us. We've spent a lot of money to get to this point, and you can trash us, you can trash me, you can embarrass me in front of my partners, in front of my union friends, all the people that we've had, and that goes for any and all. I'll take it, I won't be happy about it. I don't think it's appropriate. The gotcha questions, all that. We're going to do the great job for you guys. We listen to everybody. Hundreds of meetings, I think 500 in-person meetings with stakeholders, all the different groups, the reuse, LRA, Guy, company, thousands of phone calls, and probably 10,000 man-hours of effort. I have a lot of respect for the city, the council, all of you. I've known some of you for 25 years. I'd rather you just tell us what you want to do and what the intentions are, and I can go to a picnic with my wife, go see my kids. I got a birthday party I can be at, and I'm sure a lot of people here would rather be somewhere else than probably sitting here. And I say that with all due respect. Just let us know our destiny so we can move on and we can deploy our $20 or $30 million somewhere else over the next couple years. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Now, at this time, I do have a follow-up question for Mr. Bjerke, and I appreciate the sincere comments from Albert that he just made. But regardless of where we go, this is a question that's come up in the public, and I think you can maybe shed some light on it. If something was to be discovered on the site in terms of contaminant, it's been cleaned up, it's been signed off by the various regulatory agencies. We've seen this happen in Hunters Point and elsewhere. What is the assurance, or how do we go about if there's going to be, oh my goodness, something was in a little 1-foot spot that everything else was clean, somebody found something in their front yard or on the street of a contaminant? Who's responsible to come back and address that? And is there an ability, because I remember going back to the base reuse meetings when all the BRAC process was starting, that there's insurance companies that provide, third-party vendors that provide insurance for these types of issues that, hey, look, if something can always happen at the end of the day, after everybody says it's all okay, something could be found, and somebody needs to go back in and clean it up, and there's always this, he said, she said, Navy, it was you, no, it was this. Can you shed some light on what is the comfort level that we can provide to the public about how that piece works, regardless of who the master developer is?
Well, I think Mr. Tagami gave you a good overview of the interactions between agencies
Right.
and changes and those sorts of things. But you will find in the term sheet, and I apologize, I don't have the section and verse, but there is a requirement that we move forward, the master developer in the city, with a pollution liability policy. And so just as we had that provision with the Lennar program, we expect the master developer in the project itself to take out such a policy so that before the property becomes in the ownership of the city, we are protected against potential legal liability for owning the property. And so that's the insurance aspect of it. In terms of something found in the future, how we deal with that will depend on what is found, where it's found. If there is a direct link back to Navy, Navy has certain responsibilities we will ask them to meet. If it's some other source, then we go through our policies of what we do naturally under the law of the state of California on how to deal with it. But at all times, the project will have what's called a PLL, a pollution liability limitation insurance policy.
And I understand, you know, that is that policy then allow,
Legal.
if a regulatory agency says, yes, there's something there, and it needs to be addressed, does that policy allow somebody to go in and remediate or to
Yes.
correct it without having to wait for the pointing of fingers, Navy, this, that, maybe it was some dirt that got dropped off of a truck that was being taken to a cleanup area and a little dirt fell over here, so that there's not the tie-up of months or whatever period of time it would be of somebody that would be inconvenienced. And I'm just using the worst-case example, a residential property.
By the same token, Madam Mayor, members of council, if it is a truly small issue, then the city has our own standards and procedures and how we would address those. Anytime you get an insurance company involved, there's time frames, there's exclusions, there's, you know, our own, even our current city's legal liability has certain, you know, policy exceptions where we're on the hook until it reaches a certain amount of money, and then the insurance. So that would all be determined as we procure the insurance.
Okay.
But we will have a series of protocols on how to address things as construction on the site moves forward, just like we have rules and regulations regarding construction noise, construction debris, you know, dust, and all of these things. That will all be part of the implementation once we get past entitlements.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up since we were talking about cleanup. Thank you, Councilmember Albringer. You had any other questions at this time?
Not at this time.
Vice Mayor Brisson, questions?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to address the hypothetical that my colleague brought up, that if we suddenly decide to change where we're going to develop things, and let me restate. Right now, the Navy is aware of where we want to put things, correct?
That's correct.
The Navy has not objected to what we're doing.
No, in fact, they are coordinating their cleanup priorities
So-
based on our
Right.
direction.
So is it correct then to say that a hypothetical doesn't exist unless this council agrees to change where we're developing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so to answer this whole issue about, gee, what happens if we change things? Well, it is this council's responsibility and authority to authorize it. Therefore, it is not really a matter of concern for this council.
And yes, and it would be staff's responsibility to point out to you the impacts of the change.
That's correct. Okay, the other thing I have a question about, which Albertino III, can I ask you to please return to the scene of the sorrow? I mean, not as a funny point, but just, you know. In the issue of Mr. Parsons' statements I sent an email out to you saying, is this a description of what is going on or what was attempted? And I believe your official answer was, this is a description of what was attempted, and that right now, everything, people are being paid, people are going to the coffee shops, people are, getting their invoices done, and work is continuing. Is that correct?
Mr. Brisson, I mean, none of the article has anything to do
Okay.
with Discovery Builders, my solely owned company.
So, excellent. That's
that's it.
basically what
That's all
I
I can
needed to
say.
know. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Those are the only two questions. I have one additional question. Mr. Berkey? All right. My only really concern on the term sheet relates to the affordable housing planning and allocation. It is my belief that when the application was applied back in August of '21, it was stated that Related would be involved in the affordable housing side. Okay. Under the recent term sheet, there's a statement that say, okay, Related will have 35%, which is a very good way to make sure that something gets built. My concern is that for the rest of it, the 65%, that when we come down to the specific plan, what I would like to see is a competitive process run either by the city or an independent group that the city designates to allow for competition on the remaining 65%. I believe that there is no objection on their side, and is this something that can be easily handled by staff to put in the next as a correction?
So, Vice Mayor, I'll answer that question with yes, but I'll do it in a broader way. And what I mean by that is there may be a number of things that council members would like to see tweaked in the term sheet, would like to see minor changes, and to the extent that council wants to accept the term sheet and provide direction to staff and CFP for things that they would like to see improved in this specific plan, that would be helpful today. So direction specific as possible.
Okay.
Direction on how to handle the affordable housing, that can be accommodated.
All right. That is, again, my only comment, a question to staff.
Other questions from council? I didn't have any from council member. Okay, seeing none. I have one, maybe, I guess, between Mr. Parsons and Mr. Sino, just to get some clarification regarding the statement that Councilmember Olbringer brought up that was in the paper that was, I believe, from a deposition where it said that there was a financial implication to Discovery Builders at the time you made that statement. And I just want to make sure, I don't know what time that statement was made. I think it was in the court record, if that was back a year ago or some other time. Can you put that into context? Because we have one thing in writing that says that there was a problem to Discovery Builders that you stated under oath in a deposition to the court. And now we're hearing that, no, everything's fine, the financials are okay. And so I'm trying to get an understanding of the discrepancy between those two statements.
Understood. And again, as Albert alluded to, got to be very careful because there is.
No, I understand,
ongoing litigation.
absolutely.
It was a declaration, so it was a declaration I stated about, and it has nothing to do with Discovery Builders. There's a whole set of other entities in which Albert III is the CEO. Mm-hmm. And what was being attempted, which was denied, was to usurp his authority. And I said, if his authority is taken away, there is a potential that vendors would not be paid, and that could create problems. There's a whole host of reasons that the request has been denied, but again, this is an ongoing matter. But yes, this has no bearing or impact on Discovery or Albert III's company, and the ongoing litigation is ongoing. Is in the process of going through the dispute resolution procedure of the employment agreement. But yes, there's no vendors not being paid, and there's no financial issue right now.
Okay, I just want to make sure it was clear to the public in language that they could understand, since we kind of had the back and forth there. Okay, seeing I didn't have any more questions, at least unless something else comes up, but at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask if there's council comments, and I see Councilmember Aliano.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no more questions. I just want to get straight into comments. I want to give kind of a brief history of how we got to this point in this process. We had Lennar. Lennar didn't meet certain requirements that the council wanted and the community wanted, so we decided to part ways. From there, we created an RFQ process. And during that RFQ process, the city council, a different city council at the time, but majority of us are here still, unanimously approved that RFQ. And in that RFQ process, we determined the policy. We put it out to the development community, certain things that we want to see, the community benefits that we want, and the requirements that we want to see made. And through that policy, we then went on with making a decision to move forward with choosing a master developer. And I was one of the three that chose the Concord First Partners. The reason why I chose the Concord First Partners was, one, because I wanted to work with a Main Street company. I personally went through the process of working with Lennar, a Wall Street company, and I knew what it was like. I knew how it felt, and anybody that was intimately involved in that process knew what it was like. So I wanted to give Main Street an opportunity to prove themselves and to develop this project. Second, seeing their application, I knew the Concord First Partners could deliver on what we were requesting during the RFQ process. So we set that policy. The majority of the council chose Concord First Partners, and we directed staff to receive information, negotiate, review, and analyze everything to get to this point. Now, staff is presenting a term sheet, a staff report, and recommending moving forward with the proposed term sheet. Staff has said that we basically, there's maybe like one item that we haven't gotten in the RFQ process. One item. And Guy, I apologize, I forget what that item is, but we are basically receiving everything that we have requested during the RFQ process from Concord First Partners. Concord First Partners was given the opportunity, is now delivering on that opportunity. We're getting affordable housing, we're getting jobs, we're getting an educational campus, we're getting parks and open space, we're getting much more, plus them being a Main Street company and not a Wall Street company, they're doing it on a lesser return of rate, a rate of return. That's a huge plus. The decision before us today is based on the policy we set forth in the RFQ and the term sheet in the staff report. And staff is recommending that we move forward because this is the best term sheet that we are ever going to get. We've accomplished something amazing here today, and I don't want to see us go backwards by not moving forward to achieve what we've been talking about for years, for decades. That being said, I also have a few more comments I'd like to make. One being, there's a lot of emotions about making this decision. And, it's sad to see that the opposition towards moving this forward is based off personal feelings. You're telling me that we're going to put personal feelings first before achieving something great for this community, before bringing jobs, before bringing homes, housing that is much needed, not only within our own community, but within the Bay Area? The opposition isn't organic. A special interest did a paid campaign to push out the opposition towards this project. And I'm just not willing to let the project die because of that. There's things that we need. This isn't a beauty contest. We set the policy in the RFQ process. Staff has done the job of negotiating the term sheet, a very good term sheet. Council has done their job. It's time to deliver this for the community. So that's where I'm at. I want to see this move forward. This decision is based off the policy we set forth in RFQ. It's based off the term sheet. It's based off the staff report. And that's why I'm supporting staff's recommendation with moving this forward, and that's where I'm at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, and I just want to, I know it's a very emotionally charged issue as well as being a very business-oriented item as well. Councilmember Aliano, I just want to confirm, because as Mr. Bierke said, if there's anything that, you know, any council member wanted modified or changed in the term sheet, I interpret from your statement that you don't have anything to, that
At
you
this
would see.
moment, I have no changes to staff's recommendation.
Okay.
I am in favor of moving it forward and willing to discuss what other council members, what other changes they want to make to move it forward.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that clarification. Other council members that would like to, Councilmember Olbringer.
Thank you. So before my comments, I have one final question for Mr. Bierke that I forgot to ask earlier. My apologies.
I apologize, I need the exercise.
So I had asked you this question, and so I just wanted to get a public answer. So in terms of financial viability of the partners, could you share with us, we have this financial consultant who has been reviewing all the financials that the council hasn't seen or the public hasn't seen, but these are financial experts. So could you share with us whenever the Discovery Builder partner, they had to submit some documents for financial viability, you know, to be able to put up the assets to do this project. So was that based only on Discovery Builders, or was that based on the whole network of companies owned within the Sino family?
Right. So you've asked me to focus not on CFP, but on the discovery
Yes.
portion of CFP. And our financial analysts report that what was supplied were effectively financial references that they checked relative to all three of the partners. And relative to Discovery, it was primarily about Discovery, but it also had some references to affiliates. So again, this was in July of 2021. And there was no reason to focus just on Discovery Builders. They were representing both Discovery and some affiliates. But I do want to hasten to add that in terms of the overall partnership, there is nobody on my financial team or on staff who believes that the partnership is not capable of carrying this project off. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
While you're up there, Mr. Bierke, let me take an opportunity to ask one other question just for clarification. The last meeting we had on this, we talked about the ADUs and the junior ADUs. And can you clarify, if I understood correctly, the concept there is that, that if a homeowner chooses to use the ADU or junior ADU as an accessory dwelling unit, then a deed restriction component would come into being to make sure that that's for an affordable housing. Is that kind of correct?
So.
In terms of meeting the affordable housing?
We would make sure that any of those JADUs have a deed restriction that effectively says, should it be rented out, the tenant has to meet a certain income qualification.
Okay. And I think, in my mind, the key words is, should it be rented out? Is there anything in the term sheet or anything that requires that to be forced to be rented out because it's being used for a percentage of our affordability, so that at the end of the day, just extreme hypothetical, nobody wants to rent it out as an ADU. They all want to use it as their weight room or throw Johnny, who's in high school, in that room because we just can't stand his drum set. And we don't achieve the affordability through that process. What does that mean in terms of the affordability? How do we then achieve affordability if that was in the term sheet?
So
or
there's-
how does the master developer, is there anything that requires them to then go back and say, gee, that's not, that didn't work out, now we've got to do another 30%, or we somewhere else?
So the answer to that question is twofold. One, if council wants to direct staff and CFP to fix that in the specific plan in such a way that there is a requirement that those be done, we can investigate that, right? In other words, that those have to be rented out. The other thing is, in the specific plan, as we deal with how the affordable housing program ultimately gets put into the specific plan, we can fix that and fine-tune it where there may be if a certain percentage are not being used correctly, not being used for affordable housing, that might trigger something else in the specific plan. There are several ways that we can work with the master developer to fix that issue in the specific plan.
Okay. And then can you speak, you've seen the correspondence from the affordable housing advocates regarding to the requirements for affordable housing, where they believe that the term sheet is not sufficient to meet certain statutory or other requirements.
Right.
Is that correct from your analysis of what we have in the term sheet, or is there concern, as you kind of alluded to be addressed at the specific plan?
So I believe, I understand their concern. They're concerned about the proximity of transitional housing for homelessness and its relationship to transit, access to transit. That too, based on council direction, can be fixed in the specific plan. We can look at a number of potential ways to fix that, and we can do it as part of the evaluation of the specific plan, especially if council directs us to do so.
Okay. And then the interrelationship between where we are today at a term sheet, which is pre-specific plan.
Correct.
That information is used as the framework to move forward with the specific plan to build off of.
Yes.
It sets minimum terms in the, so getting from this point to get more in a specific plan, when you've done the financial analysis on this term sheet and the parameters in the term sheet, and there's more, the council desires more, the community desires more in the specific plan, is there another point in time to reevaluate the financials? I'm just trying to understand, because we're starting here and because we're going to have to kind of step up and, you know, maybe to address some of these things you said would be in the specific plan, but we've started here, that's kind of locked in, so to speak. And then we're going to be asking for more and more, and you know, we just heard from the master developer team about how long they've been at this and all the things they've been trying to address through this current step. How hard is it to get all that, and how does that relate to the financial analysis? Is there going to be more financial analysis done going forward?
There will be a lot of additional financial analysis. It's not necessarily just the council's wants and desires, but also the environmental mitigations, whether they're additional remediation costs that Councilwoman Obringer has raised, or traffic mitigation costs. We may find that certain mitigation costs impact the number of units and suggest that we can't do as many units. That will then also need to be evaluated in financial analysis. And at the end of the day, as we get to the entitlements, as we get more specific in the specific plan and in the EIR, that will inform what I would call the kind of the entitlement pro forma, which the Navy also expects to be available for the final negotiations of how much they receive as part of the project in the economic development conveyance. So there will be, just as, I don't mean to trivialize it, but during the Lennar process, this council moved the campus district to Highway 4. That had various impacts. It was analyzed internally by staff and the Lennar team and seen to be a net positive, and we moved forward with it. We never got to the specific plan, but as things get moved, either by council direction or as part of mitigations that are required as part of our environmental evaluation or the cleanup and timing, all of those things will change, potentially, can change. Council will be informed. There will be a public process, and the public will have an opportunity to weigh in on what is being done up into and through that process until we get to entitlements.
Okay. In other words, the financial team that you have will continue to be reassessing things as new information comes in to take a look at the financial viability. It's not just one and done at this point.
At appropriate intervals.
Right, but
yes.
it's not just one and done at this stage.
Correct.
It continues forward. Okay, Councilmember Aliano has a question of you.
Mr. Bierke, and I appreciate Mayor Hoffmeister's questions and comments related to this, and you answered it, but I feel like it's not well known or understood that what you just said, this is, the term sheet's the minimum in which we negotiate the specific plan. Everybody wants to know specifics about every little item, but we're not there at that point. So, and I mean, and that's correct, right?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, I mean,
A former redevelopment agency executive director from Contra Costa County ribbed me because most of his term sheets were 5 pages long. Now, the projects weren't quite as big, but he ribbed me for taking 50 pages to get to a term sheet. What I want to emphasize is it's not just the specific plan that this is providing direction to as a starting point, but also the disposition development agreement and the terms of the development. In other words, there are 4 documents that are going to be produced based on this term sheet. They will interact with one another, they will impact one another, and ultimately the goal is to bring a document and a series of entitlements that work both for the project and the master developer and for the community.
thank you, Mr. Bierke. And I just have follow-up comments from that, and that's another reason why I'm supporting moving it forward, because this is the basis of minimum terms in which we get to negotiate. It's a great starting point. So, and the more could be added, a whole thorough process is going to be done to get to the detailed specific plan that's going to include the public and possibly bring in more to each item that we want to, that the majority of the council wants to see and the community wants to see, wants to bring in more to each item. So I think that's a huge plus. So thank you.
Any other council comments? I think we finished with Councilmember Olbringer and Brisson. Councilmember Nakamura.
Sure, thank you. I want to start out by saying I have asked my questions. I've asked my questions about the term sheet. I've asked about affordable housing and the JADUs, stakeholder analysis, transparency and capacity. The Exhibit B, I've asked questions about that. I've asked questions about integrity and accountability and the public process and the changes that were made that went into the term sheet from the 2012, that differ from the 2012 area plan. For me, this is not about personal feelings. It's not about emotions. This is about advocating for what is right for Concord. And what I've been hearing from over close to 800 emails, probably more, higher than that, many personalized, many with, they were not all form letters that were generated by computer systems, but they were very heartfelt responses to this process. We have had a lot of public engagement on this term sheet. And I've also, many people know that I've been out in the community. Since the middle of 2021, I've been out talking with people and getting to know my constituents and what's important to them. And so I am going to preface my comments here with a statement of my priorities. First and foremost, our affordable housing. We all know that we are lacking in affordable housing, and that is a priority. We need good jobs. We need good labor jobs delivered as quickly as possible. My brothers and sisters in labor want and need good jobs, and I fully support that. That being said, I place a high priority on being able to analyze fairness, the fairness of this proposal to all stakeholders, which also requires bona fide transparency. We have a world-class project in our hands, and therefore we have an obligation to world-class integrity. For the reasons I will outline briefly, I will not be supporting moving forward with this term sheet, and I will not support any further action on the exclusive negotiating agreement, which is currently in place with Concord First Partners. I don't believe it's appropriate to approve a term sheet that varies from the 2012 area plan without first going through a public process similar to the one which established its requirements. In fact, doing so seems to put the cart before the horse. Candidate master developers should be prepared to make their case to the public before trying to bind the public to their preferences. Approving this term sheet would do precisely that. As staff has already reported, these terms would essentially obligate us to amend the 2012 area plan. And approval at this stage creates further obligations to negotiate details that are consistent with the term sheet in good faith. The residents of Concord have not agreed to important aspects of this proposal. Quite the opposite. And that must happen first. For me, it's as simple as that. The specific plan, the DDA, the steps in the DDA, bear with me here. This is heavy stuff here. The specific plan and the DDA steps in the process have been repeatedly described as opportunities for this public process, like kicking it down the can. The draft term sheet aligned with the 2012 area plan and the framework which was agreed to by all respondents to the RFQ could have moved us forward to the next step, which would have opened up for the public discussion any amendments which the candidate master developer felt necessary to present. We need affordable housing. Affordable housing remains a top priority. And I'm not satisfied with the draft term sheet as presented in that respect. Trying to count junior accessory dwelling units towards affordable housing percentages requirement isn't just disrespectful lip service. It actually feels intentionally misleading, given that there is simply no evidence that JADUs will turn into meaningful amounts of affordable housing for the residents of Concord who need it. And further, the nominal contribution offered to fund affordable housing is simply inadequate for a project of this size and scope. Which brings me to my next point. The fact remains that there isn't sufficient information to evaluate either fairness or what is really meant by feasibility from a financial perspective. Asserting the right to confidentiality is a choice, and it is not one in which a reputation for transparency can be built. Without the ability to compare directly who gets what under the financial model, the assertion that the community benefits package needs to be locked in total can't be adequately evaluated. If we cannot adequately assess the equity impact of a proposal, there's no basis for moving it to the next step. One of my concerns is the speed at which this process proceeds. We are at a point, based on the actions taken in August of 2012, where we should be deep into discussions of a specific plan. I appreciate the hard work that staff has put into this, to put in driving the process forward. But the fact remains that in the last 17 months, much time has been spent dealing with unwarranted requests and statements which contradict representations made in the summer of 2021 that the base framework was workable. Sufficient time has been granted to the Concord First partners to do this right, yet they have not demonstrated the ability to move forward expeditiously, thoroughly, and in a way which respects the public. That does not warrant moving forward with them in the more complex parts of this process. My final point is about integrity. This is a world-class project, and it needs world-class principles. More to the point, the people of Concord expect world-class due diligence, and in large part because, if not, they will do their own. Insulting the intelligence of Concord residents is not a way to build the cohesion this project demands of all of us. It's not a way to build a constructive relationship with which to pursue shared values and objectives. The residents of Concord in District 5 made that point clearly just a couple months ago. Do not take them for granted. I don't, and I won't. For these reasons, I'm not prepared to take any affirmative action on either the draft term sheet or the exclusive negotiating agreement. I'm open to further submissions by Concord First partners, which are fully responsive to what they have heard since November 30th, whether those are provided before January 31st or after. I'm willing to listen to what they have to say, and I always strive to listen to my Concord neighbors. Thank you.
Let me just clarify, if I can, Councilmember Nakamura, at the end of your comments there, you indicated, and I wasn't quite clear, a willingness to extend this term sheet beyond the 31st for, again, it's up to Concord First partners, but I mean, to address or see if they can address the concerns that were raised by the community?
I don't think we need to extend the deadline.
Okay, I didn't. Thank you. That made it clear. I'm sorry, Councilmember Olbringer.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank everybody who's here today and everyone who spent, 9 hours with us on January 7th. I know, I agree with you, Albert, we could all be doing many other things. So thank you to everybody who has been engaging in this process. As I said from this dais back in May 2022, when I voted alone to end the city's exclusive negotiating agreement with Concord U-verse Partners, this is not easy. And this decision, this is extremely consequential, and I want everyone to know that I have listened to everything that everyone has communicated to me and have been deeply, deeply thoughtful. In fact, this has, quite frankly, taken over my life. And why? Because the community's hopes and dreams, my hopes and dreams for local work built by highly skilled workers, many of whom are in this room right now, affordable housing, as we've talked about, long-term living wage jobs, a new library, a veterans facility, a youth tournament sports complex, some kind of higher education campus. They're all riding on this project. And I passionately want this project to move forward. In fact, this was what inspired me to get involved in public service here in the city of Concord back in 2010. So anyone who thinks that I don't want this to get developed is dead wrong. But this has to be a world-class project. And, I do want to acknowledge the term sheet, it has been a good effort, but it does fall short on a few things. So basing, job assumptions on a campus that no one's investing in. I'm very concerned about the lack of equitable green space in North Concord. That might seem little to some people, but it is a big deal to the people of my city council district, especially since the proposal is to put the bulk of the high density and affordable housing, if you look at what's being proposed, to be concentrated there. That is not equitable. Also, the concern about not keeping with the 25% affordable housing. I understand the need to potentially add more housing, but affordable housing and promising this community the 25%, that is not negotiable here. And then the challenge, no concrete plan for multimodal transportation. I just don't see how we don't, we're going to be creating a car-dependent community from the very beginning, which is concerning. And I know that everybody keeps telling me, don't worry about the lawsuit. That has nothing to do with this. And ordinarily, I would agree. But this is a family company that we are going to be working with. And so family business is relevant to this. And I'm going to argue, I do think that this is one of the most important issues at play because it introduces risk and uncertainty, not to mention delay while all of this gets sorted out. And that is not time that we have. And why is this important? Because this involves, one of the 45% partners, and this is a multi-billion-dollar, decades-long project. So, and another thing I will just say, I find it concerning that this was not disclosed to the city. I really feel like the city should have known about this lawsuit, and we just found out about it, in the newspaper. So, I really think that what's been presented here is a false choice. Either we just move forward and keep kicking the can down the road and getting deeper and deeper and deeper into this, or all is going to be lost. And as I mentioned earlier, I ran into a council member from Alameda a few weeks ago at an event, and Alameda is on their 4th master developer. Their 4th, and they started before we did. So, the Navy has not lost patience, or the military has not lost patience with them. And I want to be crystal clear because I see a lot of my labor friends and supporters. I want to be crystal clear that the decision I'm making today, it has nothing to do with my commitment to working men and women. I have been, and I always will be there for working men and women of this county. And I will ensure that whoever develops this project it commits to a wall-to-wall project labor agreement. In fact, I'm one of the reasons that this was included in the RFQ in the first place, in the master developer selection process. So, and I just want to remind you that all 3 master developer candidates did sign a project labor agreement. So, but my main job as a council member is to protect the city from legal and financial risk. That is my job. And my job is to listen to the people of Concord and to my constituents, the people and their families who will be here long after the project is built, the people who live here, the people who've been here some people have been here for 90 years. And many of those people, they have not been able to attend a meeting. They weren't here on the 7th. They're not here today because they're out with their families. They might be working. But that is what I've been doing. And I want to assure everybody, again, I've read all the form letters that I got from, say, Mount Diablo. I took note as to who's a Concord resident or not. I read all of the form letters from labor as well. And I do want to acknowledge, too, there were members from labor who emailed me personally from my district. I've read all of those. But I've also read and want to recognize the hundreds of emails that I've received from Concord residents, people who I have never heard from when it comes to anything political, people who, honestly, I didn't even know were still alive. They took the time. They did, and they emailed me, and they let me know their thoughts, and I cannot ignore that. I cannot ignore that trust. When I reached out to people and I said, please tell me what you think, and they told me, and I asked about the term sheet. I said, tell me what you want me to do about the term sheet. And there is just deep distrust about moving forward at this time. So for these reasons, I'm not going to be voting to accept the term sheet, and I'm going to be moving to end the exclusive negotiating agreement with Concord First Partners. Thank you.
You didn't have anything more? You're good. Yes. Vice Mayor Brisson.
Well, one of the first questions we have to have is, how the hell did we get here? First, after several years of working with Lennar, in March of 2020, the Lennar assignment for the first phase of the base collapsed. The council was strongly warned that no developer would bid on the base because of our insistence on union peace, as well as the other aspects that were laid out in our request for proposal. After the failure of the Lennar bid, the council made decisions. One, we would go for a bid on the whole base. Recently has been brought up again that, gee, why don't you do pieces? We already discussed this quite some time ago, and we decided, and I believe it was unanimous, that we're going to go for the whole base because this is the way we have the maximum strength to get this thing done. We would also require in advance that there be agreement with the trade unions so that we were guaranteed with union peace. We set out some very general, specific plans. We did not require a wall-to-wall contract. That is something which exists in BART. We required just that they have an agreement. Then we decided we needed a new process. The previous process where we had two basic, where we had actually 64 applicants, and each of them have their own little term sheet up front. The way it was structured was that we were unable to take one term sheet and say, hey, we like this, will you guys match it? Therefore, we decided that we would put an emphasis on negotiations. And the methodology that we would use is we would go out to see who would qualify to do this project. And then from there, we would pick one to go into an exclusive negotiation agreement if we were able to get through that piece. And we gave them, all applicants, what it was in advance. Then we would go from there down the road to the term sheet, to the next one, when full awareness that things may and can and sometimes have to change. So that's how we got to this situation. The decisions were all pretty much unanimous getting us in this path. We then developed and went out to the world for a summary of qualifications. We only got 3 applicants. 3. And none of the 64 that had previously applied. And it's not like the Concord Naval Weapons Station was some big secret hidden by a cabal of people hiding it from the development world. It is the largest project in San Francisco Bay Area. It's not a secret, but only 3 came up. Of the 3, we only got 1 applicant who provided the union agreement in advance. Only 1. That was Concord First Partners. The argument that we should get a different company with a pristine history of shareholders, investors, et cetera, fails on 2 basic points. One, when we had to make a decision, and we decided we were going to decide amongst those 3 applicants. Second, no such company applied. Actually, there's a third. In my view, no such company exists. Mother Teresa never created a billion-dollar development company with the blessings of the divine. It doesn't happen. Okay, so we operate in an American economic system with profits and company interests as the primary goals, and in fact, we have been told that our entire wealth as a nation depends on that concept. It is therefore key that in the economic negotiations, we also look at the down-road ability to ensure and to get what you want between a buyer and a seller. Now I cannot speak for my colleagues why they voted in August. The choice to me came down to 2 applicants, Concord First Partners and Brookfield. This is the background on why I chose Concord First Partners in the most difficult vote that I had to take. Brookfield, when they put in their application, did not submit a signed union contract. In the very first meeting I had with them, I brought this up. Their answer was, well, we really wanted to see what you really were going to insist on. I had already gone through this with Lennar. I informed them, and I was the first of the group to meet with them, that they were, quote, dead as a doornail unless they had that union contract. Only then did they start to seriously negotiate with the unions. I should also point out, 2 years prior, Brookfield had obtained the North Concord BART station contract with BART. That contract actually requires a wall-to-wall agreement. Furthermore, in the 2 years leading up to it, they never met with the unions to make that contract. They never met with the community, which is North Concord, to talk about what's going on. They never met with city staff. They never met with the city council. They just let it slide. They never pushed BART. So right there you see what they were trying and where they were going. They wanted to see what we really were going to insist. And they weren't going to commit to doing anything elsewhere until they had seen what strength and what insistence we were going to have. Furthermore, and this is kind of ironic, when I asked Brookfield who they were going to use for their 40% local hire, their answer was, quote, we have a good relationship with Albertino. Think about that right then. Okay, then research revealed the following. Brookfield, 8 months prior, had a massive demonstration in New York on wage theft. And the IBEW3, which is the electrical union in New York, brought out that they had signed an agreement with the unions and they broke it. For as far as I know, none of the partners had ever signed an agreement with the unions and broken it. Further, we've heard about the Discovery having their $11 million financial craziness with the banks. However, you notice before we were talking about who is going to ensure our pollution, what do you call it, pollution limiting, whatever? That company is AIG. It's the world largest in the world. Within the last 5 years, Brookfield had to pay them $900 million for financial shenanigans. That's more than all the costs that these three partners have ever done for anything. Brookfield also has a past history with environmental violations, and more currently. I won't even go into the issue that they are on 6 different countries, including Brazil, where they are tied into the deforestation of the Amazon. There's also dams in Maine, which are now in a whole big environmental fight. And they're still looking for some beavers that were supposed to be around in some place upstate New York. And furthermore, all right, in New York State, there's a municipality where Brookfield had gotten a contract and then did nothing, and then notified the mayor that they were walking away. The mayor called it fraud. Now, Brookfield won the bid to develop the North Concord-Bartford. And as I told you, they didn't do anything with it. What happened 6 months after I took their, looking at this and saying, these are not the people for us? They walked away from BART. They never signed the agreement, even after they were told how important it was. They never met with the community. They never met with the city staff. They never met with the city council. And this was 6 months after. So my fear, my red flags were, as far as I'm concerned, quite approved. Furthermore, Brookfield, as a Wall Street company with $600 billion in assets. By the way, people like to talk about shareholders. A major shareholder on Brookfield is from Qatar, oil money, who actually has an agreement that they sit on the board of Brookfield. So, in that case, I was upset with Brookfield. The margin of return on private companies is seriously lower than that which is required by Wall Street companies. Wall Street companies are susceptible for all the insanity of local takeovers that you see in family companies. I don't think we need to go into Elon Musk and what he's doing. One of the more significant comments that I received was that every developer over the course of 30-plus years is going to have all sorts of challenges and is going to have all sorts of attempts to try to bring out their interest. This is the economic system we have. We need to learn that we walk through the valley of death and fear no evil, not because we have some faith, but because we are stronger than evil and we can defeat it. In looking at that, I also looked at who do I want to be on the other side of this table? Do I want a Wall Street company that's united, that is with enough lawyers to make Yale look like a small firm, or do I want to deal with 3 partners, none of which have a majority share? Who am I stronger against? I have already done this with Lennar. I choose always to deal with a divided opposition. It is something, I guess, in my DNA. And what is the nature of our opposition? We are making a deal with Concord First Partners. We have already heard that the partnership can do this deal regardless of what one of the partners may occur. I should also point out that in the first meeting I had with the partners, there was a lot of talk about the lawsuit with the park. Concord First Partners, one of their partners was involved in a lawsuit with the park. Oddly enough, almost ironically, their argument was that the park was not doing enough to mitigate the environment. I informed them directly that, again, my favorite conversation, you are dead as a doornail unless you resolve the fight with the park. Because if you're suing the park, you're suing the city, because we set the park up to mitigate what we're doing here. Within 7 to 10 days, there was an agreement made with the Park District ending the dispute between the Park District and the Faria project. That's important. That's very important. It was still continued, all right, by our opposition groups, that they sued the city. They sued the park. They're going to do terrible things. The park issued an agreement saying they look forward to seeing this development done, and the park fully agreed with this Pittsburgh City Council to develop the park. And the city, which we were concerned about, the development along the hills of the park, we also were satisfied. Now, those are some of the backgrounds on why I went with Concord First Partners over Brookfield. I should also point out that the initial vote, that was what we were asked. That's what we voted on. Who do we want? None of us supported city ventures. None of us came up and said, we're not going to do it with anyone. We had a decision between Brookfield and Concord First Partners. I chose Concord First Partners for the reasons that I have laid out. Now, I want us to go into what has happened since. Since that time, we knew that Brookfield fell apart. Concord First Partners has continued in a very intense manner, dealing with the community and dealing with what we have here on the council, the staff. Yes, there are issues of concern. They have every right to be concerned that because of political reasons, that they could lose this agreement somewhere down the road. And we faced that back in May of last year. And we said, we understand your concern. We're not giving you what you wanted. Let's go forward. Let's concentrate on the term sheet. They agreed. We went ahead 4-1. By the way, we also, there was a vote in between. We had a choice in November of last year to decide, of 2 years ago, to decide whether we wanted to do the exclusive negotiation agreement with them. That vote was made unanimously. By the way, the public comment on that was nowhere near 90% one way or the other, which I'll get into as we try to discuss the other things that have been going on and how the community has been inundated with basically hit pieces and hate mail. I want you to remember that the world is a dangerous place. And we need to go forward with strength. We need to go forward with determination, not with fear. We have an opportunity to create a new era and a new legacy. And we have shown, at least the council has shown, that we have the strength to do it. Not only do we need to listen to our constituents, but we also have to lead them. And we also have a responsibility to the future constituents. And we also have a responsibility to demonstrate. Yes, thank you very much for the music. We have to demonstrate how we go forward in a dangerous world. This is important to all of us. I will be supporting moving forward. I have stated that what I want as a change is in regard to the methodology on which we select the affordable housing. I have no problem with the JDU. In fact, I wish they didn't even use that word. They should have said, we're going to make duplexes, and we're going to make sure that one of the duplexes is going to be unaffordable. I totally reject the argument that, gee, they're going to put their grandsons and mother-in-laws in those units. As I pointed out last time, it seems that my affordable housing people have no objection if my son is in your affordable duplex and your daughter is in mine, all right? Both of them have no income. Both of them are paying zero rent because 30% of zero is zero. And then if they get married, they want them to throw them all out because they're now suddenly related to everybody. No. Affordable housing, a JDU, or what used to be called a mother-in-law unit, is for people who are going to be in it. People. Whether, if they are related to you, you know what? Families come first. Where have I heard that from? That's here. There's nothing wrong with providing affordable housing to families. What's wrong with these people? So, I want to also, stop. I still have more. Hey, it's not like I'm getting paid by the hour here, all right? Or the word. And in fact, there's still one person over here who can outdo me on any talk fest. No offense. So, I want to actually go on about the fact that this community for the last year and a half has been pounded by a campaign of hate directed very singularly. And I wanted to go into what happened before I made my vote. A week before the vote in August, I had a meeting with the representatives of Save Mount Diablo. They came into City Hall. Guy Berkey was there. 2 of my interns were there. And they wanted to talk about the vote that we were going to have. What was their objections? They didn't object to the plan. They didn't object to the system. What they said was they objected to a Sino family involvement. All they kept going was Sino, Sino, Sino. I informed them that it is un-American to attack a family. I informed that it's actually against the law. Yet they insisted that any involvement by a member of the Sino family was unacceptable to them. I reminded them that I'm an American because that attitude was applied to my great-grandparents, and all my grandparents had to leave to this country. The actions of a father are not to be put upon the son. Families are not to be attacked. That was their major objection. They then put together a bunch of things, they being Save Mount Diablo, in their templates they sent out to the notorious Sino family. That's the words they used in their website, in their attack. They threw in, oh, gee, we're going to have bad workers. I reminded that I have union workers, best workers in the world in the United States. They advised that they sued the Park District. They had settled with this Park District. The Park District was on board. They argued about the design. Well, quite frankly, I don't like any designs in California. I'm sort of like I like urban chaos. But okay, we have a design review board. Oddly enough, they continued, and after the vote, they said, we picked the wrong partner. They said we should have picked the other guy. I've already outlined who the other guy was and what the other guy did. Well, how does this work out? Well, over the course of the next year, you see continuing changes in the attack path. In fact, the most recent attack path, all right, which here, again, remember, the key word, Sino, 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 all right, is that, that we voted to give it to Concord First Partners. We give it to what they described as, also known as the Sino Discovery Builders and their partners. No, they are not known as the Sino Discovery Builders and Concord Partners. They're known as Concord Partners. That's who we're dealing with. That's whose money is going to be put up. That's whose money we are going to be taking as sort of a guarantee of good behavior. That's the team that we will be looking at, Concord First Partners. Now, they then say that they want us to believe, they want you to believe that the choice is always between Sino, and another alternative. That's not correct. We had a choice between Brookfield and Concord First Partners, and we chose it. We had a choice months later to continue with Concord First Partners, and we chose it. We had 6 months later, we had a choice to continue the E&A so that Concord First Partners can concentrate on the term sheet that we wanted, and we did it 4-1. Every step of the way, we were there. Every step of the way, the opposition altered their comments. I find it very ironic that on January 7th, the reference from Save Mount Diablo's folks was that, gee, you know, back 10 years ago, we supported the village plan because it would pencil out. Just as a little reminder of background, 12 years ago, we had a citywide conference, citywide 34 meetings called the Community Service Commission, going over the base. It came down to 2 plans. One plan, which was called Concentration and Conservation, had development only north of Willow Pass, had 14,000 residents and 18,000 jobs. I supported that plan. I, along with the Concord Naval Weapons Station Neighborhood Alliance, supported that plan. Save Mount Diablo supported the village plan, which is 29,000 people, 22,000 jobs, and is the basis of what we have here. However, I didn't stop there. I met with them, Ron Brown, and went over asking, hey, you're at Save Mount Diablo. Why aren't you trying to have more open space? And I can tell you, they did not say at that meeting that they did it because it penciled out. I'll tell you, I would never go to an environmental company to try to work what the financial implications are of a billion-dollar development. It's not exactly in their wheelhouse, you know? So I was stunned to hear that now they're also objecting to the extension of 3,000 more homes on the same platform and adding 10 years. I support the idea of the extra housing. We need the housing. It's not changing how many parks we get. It's not changing anything else. And in fact, the idea that, gee, there's going to be more concentration on the North Concord BART station, hello, that animal got out of the stable 15 years ago. Both plans all called for higher development. Guess what? What else is in the North Concord BART station? The North Concord BART station. That's the way we go. So this is where we are. The emphasis here is, again, Sino. They talk about, I love this, that Albert Sino III was arrested. He was accused. What the thorough investigation, which I read, said there's no evidence that it ever occurred. And it was dropped. Then we also hear about, well, you know, they discovered this Indian bone and they tried to hide it. Well, if you read the court case, again, get the rest of the story, in December, the court says the comment that was quoted was irrelevant and immaterial, that the action taken was totally within the protocols and exactly what was expected. There was no nefarious intent. In fact, they didn't even know it was an Indian bone when they first found it, but they went through the exact same thing that you're supposed to. Talk to the coroner, talk to the sheriff. You don't know if you got a serial killer site here or whether somebody had died and was buried incidentally. Then what did they do? They cooperated fully with the tribes in the area. The tribe didn't even know that this was here. They thought there was something way on the other side. So they cooperated. They even shelled out, I believe, upwards of $500,000 to help the tribe do an archaeological dig. Then, and they even have arranged for the reinterment with the appropriate native ceremonies to be taken care of. The court found that the entire accusation was incorrect and found for discovery. But they didn't want to tell you the rest of that story. Instead, they wanted to go back almost 40 years to something about Crystal Ranch. Again, the key words, CNOs, CNOs, CNOs. This is the type of hate that we don't need here. The name of our city is Concord, not discord. I believe that we have the strength to make this go forward. I believe that I know there's going to be complications. I know there's going to be challenges. Just look at what's happened in the last 40 years between pandemics, wars. We had a presidential president who wanted to turn the Concord Naval Weapons Station into an orphanage for 40,000 kids that they were separating at the border. I don't know if you remember that one. All right? We're going to have to fight a lot. We're going to have to work together a lot. I believe that the power relationship and everything else that sits behind here allows us to go forward. And so those are my comments. And as I said, I will be moving forward that we move the term sheet with the exception of the affordable housing after the first 35% related, that we have a separate organization or the city to determine how to allocate by a competitive basis the remaining of the 65% affordable housing. And that's where I stand. And again, I would like to remind everyone that there's much more always to any story. And I welcome the opportunity, as always, to sit down with you. And I'm there. One little side note, which I forgot. The talk was about 90% of the public comment in August of 2021 being against the project. That was about 200 emails, templates. I answered nearly all of them. I went back to every individual that I know of. I may have missed 5 or 10, and I asked a bunch of questions, including offering to sit down and meet with them. None of them met. I got 20 responses. 6 of the 20 said, look, we don't really care. We don't want anything built there. That animal had left the building in 2006. It was decided if we were going to get a regional park, we're going to have to develop. So, of the others, yes, there was 14 of them had various themes of CNO, CNO, CNO. It's time we ended this. It's time we started treating things and going forward based on our power, our strength, our view to make whatever is out there, whoever opposes what we want, to get what we want. We must go forward with strength, not with fear and weakness. And therefore, I, as part of the ones who are going to be, hopefully, part of that strength, continue on this basis. But I still will sit down and listen and we'll talk to any of you, anyone. And at Pete's, I always buy the coffee. There you go.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I see that that was about 45 minutes, so I will also take 45 minutes. Anybody's keeping track. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. First of all, I want to thank all of the public who has participated in this process, both in the community workshops that were held by Concord First Partners, their emails, their phone calls, their participation in not only the public outreach meetings and these other public hearings that we've held. It's no secret, I voted not for Concord First Partners when we had 3 proposals before us. It was alluded to, that the council had, at the next step of the game, to move forward to see if we can get a term sheet. I did support Concord First Partners. I was outvoted in the first vote. I wanted to see and give them a fair opportunity to come forward, work with staff, to get a term sheet to see what that would look like and how that would benefit the community and what the community's input would be related to that term sheet. So kind of reset, lost the vote, let's go forward, let's see how that works out. Unfortunately, on balance, I can't support the deal that's outlined in the term sheet, and there are a couple of reasons for that. I applaud the creativity of the accessory dwelling units. I think it's creative. Unfortunately, there's just too many loose ends on that that doesn't really get us concrete, affordable housing that we could count on if individual homeowners are going to not do it. And then what do you do with the additional need for affordable housing? In adding the additional units, which I believe we do need more affordable housing, there's not a commensurate addition of parks and open space to counterbalance those additional people out there. The other item is that there's been some changes from our area plan, which Councilmember Nakamura alluded to. And in my mind, there's 2 or 3 that are concerning to me in that a master developer team did not understand the history and the importance of those as they move forward in the term sheet process. And I'm looking for a partner that understands that history and those important elements, and those being the buffer areas, the connectivity to through the clustered villages, the importance of integrating Go Momentum ongoingly into the project, not just moving it each phase, and they'll be there temporary, and then we might be able to bring them back in the R&D area if they want that. And then the other thing, so those are area plan issues. Do I want to put those forward and work on those in the specific plan, as Mr. Bierke said? Those are things that we could identify and further move forward with. I get concerned, and I have a concern about that, because when we start with the term sheet, it's hard to add more things in as you go forward. Obviously, the development company and the development team has to look at cost issues, and we all know that adding more things, adding more open space, adjusting units, it just gets to be a reevaluation of financials. That will have to be done anyway, but I don't think it's fair to put that burden into the specific plan, because we're going to be having to try to add more and more, because the basement now is the term sheet. That's where we're starting from. There's no guarantee that they would be able to add anything more into the term sheet as we go through the specific plan. I don't care who the master developer is. This is just the way the process works. Whatever term sheet you have going forward into the next step, it's hard to add in more things, folks. It gets a little bit more difficult because they hold up the term sheet and say, but that wasn't in the term sheet. Well, yeah, we'll look at it. There's no guarantee that we'll include it because the term sheet sets the floor. So adding more and more is a little bit harder to do. So there's some things that I thought were missing in the term sheet. And I look at that as to the development team is, where was their creativity? Where was their understanding of the past history in terms of addressing those issues that were important to the community at this step of the game? And then the last part is listening to the community and the master developer team that's been put together. And I don't disagree it's going to take 40 years. I think it's probably going to take 50 years. I argued back when we said 25 years, this is a 40-year process. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So it's going to be long-term partnership with whoever our master developer partner is. And at this point in time, I think there's just too many distractions with our master developer partner here that's put forward the draft term sheet that's divided our community and not unified our community. Some of it, no fault of the master developer team directly, but inadvertently through business transactions, through other things that are coming forward, it's a distraction and it's dividing our community. I'm looking for a master developer partner that can unify our community together, and I don't see this happening with the path continuing to go down with this master developer team and with the term sheets that we have specifically before us. I think the term sheet is problematic. I think there's a lot of good things in there. And at the same time, I think I look at, some things that have come up that concerned me in terms of response by the master developer team, in terms of not informing the city. I think Councilmember Olbringer brought it up earlier when there was litigation issues. They didn't think it was relevant to letting us know. And to me, that's important. Where's the trust? Where's the integrity? Where's the information to let us know? We have to read about it in the newspapers. That's not what I'm looking for in a partnership arrangement. And I think the heightened sensitivity of that is a concern to me. So I think the development team is good in what they do, have been focused on, and I know we heard from Mr. Parsons about some projects, and I'm very familiar with them on Buchanan there, the cold storage tank of, I think it was old Chevron, and this type of project. They're very different. Cleaning up a tank farm versus what we have to do here. And I appreciate they brought in Mr. Sagami to help them in that aspect. But I think really at the end of the day, it's who's going to be best for our community and listening to the community concerns, and who can be a unifier in moving us forward in the process. And that, plus some of the other things in the term sheet, I'm not supportive to go forward with the master developer, and I would basically be at the next step looking for staff to return to the city council at an appropriate time in the near future with what our options would be, assuming that the vote this morning goes as I've heard from the discussion at this point in time. And I will say, like I said, the master developer team, I think, does good in their various aspects in their past history, a lot of vertical development, greenfield-oriented development, Mr. Sagami on commercial, industrial cleanup of a base. The fit in what I see in the term sheets and see how they're trying to fulfill the community vision, I don't see a match there for our community. And so for those reasons, I'm not going to be supportive of approving the term sheet as presented to us and allowing the ENA time period to expire on the 31st. And that almost concludes my comments, but I do want to give a absolute thanks to the Concord First Partners team and all of their experts that they've had to assist them in working with our staff on the term sheet that was presented to us. I do believe they made a sincere effort to try to put things together. I just think that there were some components that were missing that were very key to me to understand the vision of where they're coming from as to how that fits in our world-class vision, and I didn't see a connection there in the term sheet. So for those reasons, I'm not going to be supportive of approving the term sheet. Vice Mayor Brisson.
Would you be willing to extend the ENA so that Concord First Partners can come back and address your concerns, or do you feel that that is a pointless exercise?
I would say that would be pointless, because I think one of the concerns that I have is, one of the components of my consideration is the community concerns that have been brought up. I don't see that there's any way forward with all the distractions that have been identified for near term, as well as some of the issues that have brought back in the past. And I don't think that would be fair to the master developer. I think, as Mr. Albertino addressed us at the podium, make a decision and don't stretch this out. He is a company man, he's a businessman, a family man, and wants to be able to move forward if that's the direction the council chooses with his business operations and his investments and his opportunities. And I think we owe him that respect. So with that, I will call for the question. Oh, wait, City Attorney, are we?
Through the mayor, I just want to clarify that Mr. Bierke has offered alternative motions in the staff report for your reference.
Correct, and Vice Mayor Brisson mentioned one of those as far as extending the ENA, I believe, but I don't know, can we do that this evening, I don't think it's necessary, but I just want to make sure, can you tell us the exact 3 options that are before us this evening, or this morning? I'll get it. Okay, I'll pull it up. I got it. I just flipped the page. So we can approve the term sheet as drafted, provide direction to the LRA staff to come back at a continued meeting, or we don't have an opportunity to continue? I think that's the problem, is this staff report was written to continue to the 28th, is the one I'm referring to. So maybe, Mr. Bierke, if you could identify, just for the public's information, as to what are the three legal options we have here today before us.
Well, you have multiple options, but option 2 assumed you were taking action on January 7th. Option 2 would, if you were interested in continuing, you would need to direct staff, a majority of you would need to direct staff to call a special meeting to consider the extension of the ENA, since that's not before you today, right? That's
Right.
not part of the agenda item. And then so those are the three options, and clearly 3 of you have landed on one of them.
Okay, so extending the ENAs, Vice Mayor Brisson had suggested, that would not be able to be an action we could take at this meeting. It would have to be set for a future agenda item prior to the ENA expiration, which is the 31st, which basically would only allow the council Monday and Tuesday to consider that for legal postings. And I know I'm not available on both those dates. So, but anyway, my perspective is I'm not interested in continuing forward with the ENA.
No, I was just gonna
Council
say,
member.
it sounds like there's 3 votes for item number 3, so.
I'm
think we
going
need
to
keep beating around
No,
the
I'm not
bush,
going to beat it. I'm just
so.
going to ask at this time if there is a motion from the council. And who would like to make that motion? Councilmember Olbringer.
I will move that this council directs LRA staff to let the ENA with Concord First Partners expire on January 31st, 2023.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. Councilmember Aliano. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We'll ask the city clerk for a vote.
Councilmember Aliano.
No.
Councilmember Nakamura.
Yes.
Councilmember Obringer.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brisson.
No.
Mayor Hoffmeister.
Yes.
The motion passes in the affirmative.
Okay, that concludes our business item of the day, and so we are adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance.